The Grand Convocation Chamber was the oldest room in the known galaxy. It sat at the heart of the Eternal Throne, a station so large that it had its own gravity and its own weather. 42 species had built it together over 11,000 years, and in all that time, no decision made inside its walls had ever been questioned. The Cerethian hegemony did not make mistakes. That was what every species in the Orion Arm believed. That was what Emperor Vorath Kaysin believed most of all. He sat on the jade seat, a throne carved from a single gemstone taken from a dead world. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his golden eyes moved slowly across the rows of ambassadors, generals, and advisors that filled the chamber. He was 900 years old. He had ruled for 600 of those years. He had never once raised his voice, because he had never needed to. Today, the chamber was louder than usual. The reason was simple. A young species on the far edge of the Orion Arm had done something it was not supposed to do. It had built a warp engine. It had jumped between stars for the first time. The species called itself human. "They are primitive," said Grand Admiral Rethon, standing at the center of the chamber floor. He was tall, even for a Cerethian, and his military coat was covered in medals from campaigns against species that no longer existed. "Their engine is crude. Their ships are slow. They have a handful of colonies, nothing more. But the law of cradled flames is clear. No species may develop faster than light travel without our guidance. Those that do are classified as unshackled flames, and they must be removed before they spread." A murmur of agreement rolled through the chamber. Most of the 42 species nodded. They had seen this before. 12 times in 11,000 years, the hegemony had discovered a young species reaching for the stars without permission. 12 times, the hegemony had sent a purge fleet. 12 times, the problem had been solved. But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Thilla Ven rose from her seat. She was Keth, an insectoid species with 4 arms and large dark eyes that reflected the light of the chamber like polished glass. She was small compared to the Cerethian, but her voice carried. "I have studied the human transmissions for 20 years, she said. "They are not like the others. They are creative. They are stubborn. They fight each other constantly, yet they also build hospitals and schools in the middle of their wars. They are messy and loud and unpredictable, and I believe we should talk to them before we try to destroy them." Rethan laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "Talk to them? Ambassador, we do not negotiate with fire. We put it out." The chamber laughed with him. Thilla Ven sat down, her mandibles clicking in quiet frustration. She knew she would fail, but she had tried. Then another voice spoke. It came from the far corner of the chamber, from a seat that most people forgot was occupied. Archivist Salon was the oldest living being in the hegemony. He was not Cerethian. He was not any species that had a common name. His body was made of living crystal, pale blue and translucent, and light moved through him like thoughts made visible. He had been alive for 9,000 years. He remembered things that everyone else had chosen to forget. "You have read their books," Salon said. His voice was soft, like wind through glass. "You have decoded their languages. You have watched their wars and their music and their art. You have studied them for decades, and you believe you understand them." He paused. The chamber was silent. "You do not understand them," he said. "You see a species that fights itself, and you think it is weak. But a species that survives its own wars is not weak. It is something far more dangerous. It is a species that knows how to take a beating and get back up. You are about to hit them. I promise you, they will get back up." Emperor Vorath stared at the old crystal being for a long moment. Then he turned to the chamber. "The vote," he said. It was not close. 40 of the 42 species voted for extermination. Only the Keth and one other small species voted against. The emperor sealed the decree with his own blood, pressed to the ancient stone tablet that held the law of cradled flames. Grand Admiral Rethen bowed. "I will assemble the fleet at once. 800 warships. We will begin with their outer colonies and work inward. Earth will be last. They will watch their children die before they die themselves." "Make it clean," Vorath said. "Make it fast, and make sure nothing survives." The Purge fleet departed 3 days later. 800 warships, each one larger than a human city, moving in perfect formation through the dark between stars. The hegemony celebrated. News broadcasts across 42 worlds showed the fleet's departure and called it a triumph of order over chaos. Commentators praised the emperor's wisdom. Artists began painting murals of the victory that had not yet happened. No one paid attention to Archivist Salon, who returned to his quarters and sat alone in the dark. He had seen this 12 times before. He had watched 12 species burn. But this time, for the first time in 9,000 years, he was afraid. Not afraid of the humans, afraid of what was about to happen to the hegemony. And far away in the cold void between stars, something flickered on a hegemony long-range sensor. The technician on duty frowned at his screen. For a fraction of a second, a contact had appeared. Something enormous. Something that could not possibly exist. He ran a diagnostic. The sensors were fine. He checked the logs. Nothing. He shrugged and marked it as background radiation. It was not background radiation. Harvest 7 was not a beautiful world. It was a moon orbiting a gas giant on the edge of human space, and its sky was always the color of rust. But 4 million people had built their lives there. They had farms and schools, and small towns with names that reminded them of places on Earth they had never seen. They had children who played in fields of red wheat that grew taller than a man. They were simple people, mostly, farmers, miners, teachers. They were not soldiers. They had no warships. They had cargo haulers and a small militia with outdated rifles. They were in every way defenseless. The Purge fleet arrived on a Tuesday. Grand Admiral Rethen chose Harvest 7 as his first target because it was small and far from Earth. A test, he called it. A chance to calibrate his weapons before the real work began. He expected no resistance, and he received none. The colony's orbital station, a spinning ring of metal that served as a port for cargo ships, detected the fleet 12 minutes before it arrived. The station commander, a retired pilot named Oren Diaz, sent a distress signal toward Earth. He knew it would take hours to arrive. He knew no help would come in time. He sent it anyway, because that was all he could do. Then the sky above Harvest 7 filled with light, and the station was gone. Captain Lena Vasquez was loading grain onto her cargo shuttle when the first explosions hit. She was 34 years old, born on Harvest 7, the daughter of farmers who had come from Mexico City on the first colony ship. She was not a soldier. She was a pilot who moved wheat and machine parts between moons. But when the ground shook and the sky turned white, she did what soldiers do. She moved. She ran through the port, screaming at everyone she passed to get to her shuttle. 40 people followed her. Some were workers from the port. Some were strangers. 11 of them were children. She loaded them all into the cargo bay, sealed the doors, and launched without clearance, without a flight plan, without anything except the desperate need to get off the ground before the next bombardment hit. She made it. Barely. Her shuttle shook so hard during the climb that 3 of the loading straps snapped, and crates of grain slammed against the walls. A piece of debris from the destroyed orbital station punched a hole through her left wing, and she lost half her fuel. But she made it to orbit, and then she kept going, pushing the damaged shuttle toward the edge of the system as fast as it could move. Behind her, Harvest 7 burned. Grand Admiral Rethen watched the bombardment from his flagship, with the calm expression of a man doing paperwork. His officers recorded everything: the number of targets destroyed, the energy output of each weapon strike, the estimated population reduction per minute. They filed it under standard categories, the same categories they had used 12 times before for 12 other species that no longer existed. 3.6 million people died in under an hour. Rithon did not know their names. He did not know that Maria Vasquez, age 7, had just learned to ride a bicycle. He did not know that Oren Diaz had a collection of paper books that he kept in a glass case. He did not know that a boy named Kai had been planning to ask a girl named Suri to a dance that weekend. He did not know, and he did not care. In her damaged shuttle, drifting through cold space with 40 survivors and not enough air, Captain Vasquez recorded a message. She held the recorder in shaking hands, and her voice cracked, but she spoke clearly. "This is Captain Lena Vasquez of the cargo vessel Paloma. Harvest 7 is gone. They came without warning. They killed everyone. I have 40 survivors, 11 children. We are damaged and losing air. I do not know if anyone will hear this, but if you do, please remember us. Please remember Harvest 7. Please remember that we were here." She turned off the recorder and sat in silence, watching the stars through her cracked windshield. She did not cry. She was saving the air. On Earth, 12 hours later, the fragmented distress signal from Harvest 7 reached Admiral Konstantin Volkov at the United Terran Defense Compact headquarters in Geneva. The message was broken and full of static, but the meaning was clear. An alien fleet had destroyed Harvest 7. 4 million people were dead, and the fleet was heading for Earth. Volkov was 61 years old. He had white hair and a face like a closed fist. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war that everyone told him would never come. He had been called paranoid. He had been called a waste of resources. He had been told, again and again, that humanity was alone in the universe, and that his secret military projects were a drain on the public treasury. He read the distress signal 3 times. Then he picked up a phone that had no label and no number, and was connected to a line that did not officially exist. "Wake up the Erebus," he said. Far beyond Neptune, past the last outpost of human civilization, deep inside an asteroid that had been hollowed out and rebuilt over 30 years of secret work, something woke up. Running lights fired in sequence along a hull so large that it had its own horizon. Power systems that had been sleeping for years roared to life with a sound that vibrated through the rock around it. Weapon arrays unfolded like the wings of a bird made of black steel. The asteroid cracked open like an egg, and the thing inside it began to move. Grand Admiral Rethon was in a good mood. The destruction of Harvest 7 had been clean, efficient, and well within projected parameters. His officers had filed their reports. His weapons crews had celebrated with extra rations. The fleet was moving toward Earth at a comfortable pace, because Rethon saw no reason to hurry. The humans had no military worth mentioning. Their largest warship was the size of a hegemony patrol boat. This campaign would be remembered as one of the easiest in hegemony history. Then his sensor officer said something that changed everything. "Admiral, I have a contact on long-range sensors. Single vessel. Intercept course." Rethon barely looked up from his command table. "One ship? Ignore it. Probably a cargo hauler trying to run." "Sir." The sensor officer's voice had changed. It was higher now, and tight. "The contact is 14 kilometers long." The bridge went silent. Rethon turned slowly. The largest warship in the hegemony was a dreadnought, and it was 2.3 kilometers from nose to tail. No species in the known galaxy had ever built a ship 14 kilometers long. It was not possible. The engineering alone would take centuries. The power requirements would drain a star. "That is a sensor error," Rethon said. "I have confirmed it on all arrays, sir. It is not an error. And sir, its energy signature is beyond anything in our database. The threat assessment system does not have a classification for it. It keeps returning the word unknown. Rithon walked to the main display and stared at the dot on the screen. It was closing fast, much faster than any hegemony ship could move. He felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt cold. All ships combat formation, he ordered. Charge all weapons. Raise shields. 800 warships rearranged themselves into a wall of firepower. Every cannon, every missile battery, every energy lance pointed at the approaching dot. Rithon had enough destructive power under his command to crack a moon. He told himself that was enough. He almost believed it. The ship decloaked at a distance of 50,000 kilometers. It came out of nothing like a nightmare stepping out of a shadow. One moment there was empty space, and the next moment there was a vessel so large that it blocked the stars behind it. Its hull was black, angular, and covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb light. Weapon arrays lined its sides like the teeth of some deep-sea predator. It was ugly. It was brutal. It was the most terrifying thing anyone on the hegemony fleet had ever seen. It broadcast on all hegemony frequencies in perfect Cerathian language, with a human voice that was calm and steady and absolutely without fear. This is the United Terran ship Erebus. You are carrying the blood of our children on your hulls. You will go no further. Rithon stared at the image on his screen. His mouth was dry. His claws gripped the edge of his command table so hard that the metal bent. All ships, he said, open fire. 800 warships fired at once. The display turned white with the combined output of every weapon system in the Purge fleet. Energy beams, kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes, graviton lances, everything the hegemony had built over 11,000 years of military development poured into a single massive barrage aimed at the heart of the Erebus. The barrage hit the ship, and nothing happened. The Erebus did not raise shields. It did not dodge. It did not even slow down. The combined firepower of 800 warships struck its hull, and the hull simply took it. The black armor plating shifted and moved, absorbing the energy, redistributing the force, learning the frequency of every weapon that touched it. A scorch mark appeared near the bow. It healed itself in seconds. On the hegemony flagship, a weapons officer turned to Rithon with a face the color of ash. Admiral, our weapons are having zero effect. The hull, it is adapting. Each time we fire, it becomes more resistant. We are teaching it how to survive us. Rithon opened his mouth to give another order. He never got the chance. The Erebus fired one shot. It was not a beam or a missile. It was something new, a kinetic singularity lance, a weapon that compressed matter into a point of infinite density and then released it in a focused arc. The shot left the Erebus and crossed the distance between the two fleets in less than a second. It did not hit a single ship. It passed through the fleet like a blade through water. 214 warships ceased to exist. They did not explode. They simply stopped being there, replaced by a line of glowing dust that stretched across the void like a scar. The remaining ships scattered. Formation broke. Captains shouted over each other on open channels. Some tried to jump to warp. Some simply froze, their crews staring at their displays in total disbelief. Rithon's flagship was crippled. Half the ship was dark. Warning alarms screamed from every console. He stood in the middle of his broken bridge, surrounded by sparking wires and the smell of burning metal. And he understood something that no hegemony officer had understood in 11,000 years. They were not the strongest thing in the galaxy. They never had been. They had simply never met anything that fought back. The Erebus broadcast again. The same voice, the same calm. That was restraint. The next will not be. Surrender your fleet and transmit the coordinates of your throne. You have the span of one human heartbeat to decide. Rithon surrendered. He did it with his own voice, on an open channel, so that every surviving ship could hear. Some of his officers wept, not from pain or shame, but from the simple, crushing weight of understanding that everything they had believed about the universe was wrong. Aboard the Erebus, Commander Idris Kenga stood on his bridge and watched the hegemony fleet go dark. He was 47 years old, born in Nairobi, and he had spent the last 15 years of his life living inside a secret that weighed more than the ship he commanded. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He thought about Harvest 7 and the 3.6 million names that would never answer when called. Then he opened a second sealed mission file, one that only he was authorized to read. He broke the digital seal and read the orders inside, and his face went pale. The Erebus had not been built to defend Earth. It had been built to reach the throne. The recording spread through the hegemony like a disease. Every council chamber, every military base, every civilian broadcast network, all of them played the same footage. A single human ship, 14 kilometers of black armor, destroying 214 warships with a single shot. The footage was 11 seconds long. People watched it hundreds of times. They watched it the way someone watches a building collapse, unable to look away, unable to understand what they are seeing. For the first time in 11,000 years, the hegemony was afraid. On the eternal throne, Emperor Vorath Kaseen sat in his private chamber and watched the recording one more time. His golden eyes did not blink. His claws were still. When it ended, he closed the screen and sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood and gave the order that would define the end of his empire. Mobilize the core armada. Every ship, every reserve, every vessel that can carry a weapon. I want 5,000 warships around this station within 1 week. And send word to every species in the hegemony. This is not a request. This is a command. Anyone who does not send ships will be treated as a traitor. 5,000 warships gathered around the eternal throne. It was the largest fleet assembled in 4,000 years. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, carriers, destroyers, a wall of metal and fire that stretched across the entire system. Orbital defense platforms locked into position. Shield generators powered up around the station itself. The hegemony prepared for war with the confidence of an empire that had never lost. But behind the confidence, there was a crack, and it was growing. Ambassador Thilla Ven sat in her quarters and made a decision that she knew would cost her everything. She had spent 20 years studying humans. She had read their literature, listened to their music, watched their history unfold through intercepted transmissions. She knew them better than anyone in the hegemony, and she knew that what was coming could not be stopped with warships. She opened a secret communication channel, one that she had built herself, using old Keth intelligence codes, and sent a message toward Earth. It was short and simple. I am Ambassador Thilla Ven of the Keth. I voted against the purge. I want to help. Please respond. She never received an answer. Hegemony intelligence intercepted the transmission 6 hours later. Thilla Ven was arrested, dragged from her quarters in restraints, and charged with treason against the throne. She did not resist. She walked to her cell, with her head held high, and her dark eyes reflecting nothing but the light of the corridor. That same day, Archai the Sealan requested a private audience with the Emperor. It was granted, because even now, even in the middle of a crisis, no one refused the oldest living being in the galaxy. Sealan entered the Emperor's chamber slowly. His crystal body was dimmer than it had been. He was old even by the standards of a being who had lived for 9,000 years. I must tell you something, Sealan said, that you already know, but have chosen to forget. Vorath waved a claw. Speak. We have done this 12 times. 12 young species discovered warp travel without our permission. 12 times we sent a purge fleet. 12 times we burned their worlds and erased their names from history. We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves it was the law. But it was not law, Vorath. It was murder. We killed children because we were afraid of what they might become. They were threats, Vorath said. They were children. Selon's light pulsed once, bright and sharp. And now we have found a child that fights back, and you are surprised? You have spent 11,000 years killing the weak, and you are shocked that you have finally found the strong? We are the hegemony, Vorath said, and his voice was like stone. We are the order of the galaxy. Without us, there is chaos. Without us, Selon said softly, there is freedom, and that is what you have always been afraid of. Vorath stared at the old crystal being for a long time. Then he reached out with one massive clawed hand and grabbed Selon by the throat. Selon did not resist. He did not have the strength, and he did not have the desire. Vorath squeezed, and the crystal shattered. Selon broke into 1,000 glittering pieces that scattered across the marble floor. 9,000 years of memory, gone in an instant. Vorath looked at the broken remains of the oldest being in the galaxy and felt nothing. Clean this up, he said to his guards, and prepare for the human ship. It is coming. The Erebus arrived at the throne system 3 days later. It came alone. One ship against 5,000. One ship against the most fortified station in the galaxy. Every sensor in the system tracked it as it slowed to a stop at the edge of the defense perimeter. Commander Kenga stood on his bridge and looked at the wall of warships facing him. He took a breath. Then he opened a broadcast channel, not just to the Hegemony fleet, not just to the Eternal Throne, but to every receiver in the galaxy. Every ship, every station, every colony, every home with a communication device heard what came next. He did not threaten. He did not make demands. He did not announce his weapons or his capabilities. He read names. Maria Vasquez, age 7. Oren Diaz, age 59. Kai Nakamura, age 16. Suri Patel, age 15. He read them one at a time. 3.6 million names. Every person who had lived and died on Harvest 7. He read them in a steady, calm voice, without pause, without emotion, without stopping. The broadcast lasted 7 hours. Across the galaxy, people listened. On hegemony worlds, citizens stopped what they were doing and listened. On vassal worlds, oppressed species who had lived under hegemony rule for centuries listened. On ships and stations and remote outposts, beings of every species heard the names of 4 million strangers and understood, for the first time, what the hegemony had done. No one turned it off. Not a single receiver in the galaxy was switched off during those 7 hours. When the last name was read, Kenga spoke once more. We did not come here to conquer. We came here so that you would remember them. And now, you will answer for them. The Erebus's weapons began to charge, and across the galaxy, something began to stir. The core armada attacked at dawn, or what passed for dawn on the Eternal Throne, the moment when the station's artificial sun reached its highest point, and the golden light filled the void around it. 5,000 warships moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of firepower that should have been enough to break any enemy that had ever existed. The Erebus moved to meet them. This time, it was different. The hegemony had learned from the Purge fleet's failure. Their weapons had been recalibrated. Their tactics had been redesigned. They did not fire in a single mass volley. Instead, they attacked in waves, from multiple angles, using different weapon frequencies with each pass, trying to overwhelm the adaptive hull before it could adjust. It worked, partially. The Erebus took hits, real hits. Its hull cracked in 3 places. A section of its portside armor peeled away in a shower of burning metal. Internal explosions sent shudders through the ship. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Lights flickered. Systems failed and rebooted and failed again. On the bridge, Commander Kenga gripped his chair as the ship shook. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, dripping into his eye. Around him, his officers fought to keep the ship alive. Damage reports scrolled across every screen, faster than anyone could read them. "Hull integrity at 62%, his first officer shouted. "We cannot sustain this rate of damage." "We do not need to sustain it," Kenga said. He wiped the blood from his eye and looked at the tactical display. "We need to last long enough." The Erebus had never been meant to fight the entire hegemony alone. It was a hammer, not a shield. Its true purpose, the purpose written in that second sealed mission file, was not to win the battle. It was to buy time. And what it was buying time for had already begun. Across the galaxy, Captain Lena Vasquez's distress recording had done its work. The Erebus had broadcasted on every frequency before arriving at the throne, along with Kenga's reading of the names. The message had reached every corner of hegemony space, and it had landed like a spark in dry grass. The Keth were first. They had always been uncomfortable with the hegemony's methods, and Thylaven's arrest had pushed them past their limit. The Ket fleet, small but fast, turned on the hegemony supply convoy in the Velix system, and destroyed it in 30 minutes. Without that convoy, the core armada would receive no replacement ammunition. Then the Dreth, a species of aquatic beings who had been vassal servants for 2,000 years, seized control of their own orbital stations, and declared independence. Then the Makari, the Olasi, the Pale Kindred, species after species that had lived under the hegemony's boot for centuries, heard the names of Harvest Seven's dead, and decided that enough was enough. It was not a coordinated rebellion. There was no master plan. It was simply millions of beings across thousands of worlds, making the same decision at the same time. The hegemony had ruled through fear for 11,000 years. But fear only works when the alternative is worse. And now, for the first time, the alternative was hope. Back at the Eternal Throne, the core armada began to crumble. Reinforcements that had been promised from vassal species never arrived. Supply lines were cut. Communication channels filled with reports of rebellion and defection. Captains from non-Cerethian species began withdrawing their ships. Quietly at first, then openly. The 5,000 ships became 4,000, then 3,000, then 2,000. It was damaged now, badly damaged. Whole sections of the ship were sealed off and venting atmosphere. A third of its weapons were offline. But it was still moving, still shooting, still absorbing everything the hegemony threw at it, and giving it back tenfold. And it was getting closer to the Eternal Throne with every minute. Rethon's recaptured forces had told the Emperor everything about the Erebus. Vorath had studied the data and prepared his best defenses. But no amount of preparation could account for the simple fact that the Erebus did not stop. It did not retreat. It did not hesitate. It kept coming, like something out of a nightmare, bleeding fire from 100 wounds and still pushing forward. When the Erebus breached the final defense perimeter, Vorath ordered the orbital platforms to fire everything they had. The Erebus staggered. Its bow crumpled. For a moment, it seemed to stop. Then it fired its singularity lance one final time, carving a path straight through the defense platforms, and it crashed into the docking ring of the Eternal Throne itself. Boarding teams poured from the Erebus into the station. They were Marines in heavy armor, exhausted and bleeding, and absolutely unstoppable. They fought through the station's corridors for 3 hours, taking ground step by step, until they reached the Grand Convocation Chamber. Commander Kenga walked through the shattered doors of the chamber with blood on his face and a rifle in his hands. Emperor Vorath Kaysin stood at the jade seat, surrounded by the broken remains of his guards. He was wounded, his scales were cracked, one of his golden eyes was swollen shut. But he stood straight, because he was an emperor, and emperors do not kneel. "You think you have won?" Vorath said. You are one ship, one species. We are 42 civilizations. You were 42 civilizations, Kenga said. He lowered his rifle. Now you are alone. Your vassals chose us, not because we are strong, but because we asked them to be free. Vorath opened his mouth to respond, and then the communication screens around the chamber flickered to life, one by one. Each screen showed a different world, a different species, a different declaration of independence. The Keth, the Dreth, the Makari, dozens more. World after world after world, breaking away from the hegemony in real time. Vorath watched his empire dissolve. He watched 11,000 years of control and order and power fall apart in minutes. And Kenga did not kill him. That was the punishment. Vorath was left alive, standing in his empty throne room, watching his legacy crumble to nothing. Not death, irrelevance. 1 year later, the Galactic Concord was established. It was not an empire. It had no throne, no emperor, no law that said young species must kneel or burn. It was a voluntary alliance of free species, built on a simple principle that every civilization had the right to reach for the stars without asking permission. Ambassador Thilla Ven, released from her hegemony prison on the day of Vorath's defeat, was elected as the Concord's first speaker. She accepted the role with quiet grace and immediately began the work of building something better than what had come before. Captain Lena Vasquez stood on the bridge of a new colony ship, heading back to the system where Harvest 7 had been. The ship carried settlers, volunteers who wanted to rebuild. The passenger manifest listed people from 19 different species. Humans, Keth, Dreth, Makari, and others, all traveling together to plant new seeds in burned soil. And the Erebus, broken, scarred, its hull torn open in 100 places, was towed to orbit around Harvest 7's moon. It was decommissioned and declared a memorial. Engineers worked for months to inscribe every surface of its hull with names. 3.6 million names, etched in metal, visible from orbit. In the archives of the Galactic Concord, they found Selen's last words, recovered from the throne's surveillance recordings. The old crystal being had spoken them moments before the Emperor killed him, and they were carved into the founding charter of the Concord, where every species could read them. Fear the species that wages war not for conquest, but for the names of its dead.